The council chamber was filled with beings from across the galaxy. Each one needed different air to breathe and different temperatures to survive. Machines hummed quietly, keeping everyone alive in their own special way. Ambassador Kelrin stood in the center of the room. He was a Valkyrie, and his body was made of crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows everywhere. His people were dying and everyone in the room knew it. "We have 50,000 people left," Kelrin said, his voice shaking slightly. "Our star is dying. We looked at every planet we could find. Every single one is taken or too difficult for us to live on. We have nowhere to go." The council members whispered among themselves. Some felt sorry for the Valkyrie. Others were worried about where this conversation was heading. They had heard these kinds of requests before and they never ended well. Then Thomas Webb spoke up. He was human, and he had been sitting quietly in his seat for the entire meeting. When he spoke, everyone stopped talking and listened. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy. They were strange, unpredictable, and somehow they had survived on a planet that should have killed them long ago. "There is one planet available," Thomas said slowly. He did not sound happy about what he was going to say. "Earth. My homeworld. We left it 200 years ago and moved to space stations and other planets. It is empty now. Technically, you could live there." The room exploded with noise. Everyone started talking at once. A council member named Varric, who was made of gas and lived in a floating ball, turned bright orange with shock. "You cannot mean Earth," Varric said loudly. "Earth is a Class 13 death world. The Valkyrie are Class 2 beings. They are fragile. The gravity alone would crush them." Thomas nodded. "I know. But Ambassador Kelrin asked for options. This is the only option I have. Earth has air you can breathe. It has water. It has resources. Yes, it is dangerous. Very dangerous. But it is empty and it is available." Kelrin felt hope surge through his crystal body. A planet? An actual planet they could land on? "Class 13 seems very extreme," Kelrin said carefully. "Surely humans are just being too careful. Your people always worry too much about danger." Thomas looked at Kelrin for a long moment. His face was serious and sad at the same time. "No," Thomas said firmly. "The classification is correct. Earth is a nightmare by galactic standards. Most species would die there in days. But you said you were desperate. I'm telling you this option exists. What you do with that information is up to you." The Valkyrie delegation huddled together. Their crystal bodies made soft chiming sounds as they talked in their own language. They argued back and forth for several minutes. Finally, Kelrin turned back to face Thomas. "We accept," Kelrin declared proudly. "We will colonize Earth. The Valkyrie have lived on 17 different planets. We know how to adapt to new places." Thomas sat back in his chair slowly. Something in his eyes looked like he wanted to say more, but he stayed quiet for a moment. "I will send you all the information we have about Earth," Thomas finally said. "Read everything carefully. Study the survival guides. My people evolved on Earth over millions of years. You will not have that kind of time to adapt. You need to learn fast." Kelrin felt slightly insulted. Did this human think the Valkyrie were stupid? They were a proud species with advanced technology and 17 successful colonies. "Thank you for your concern, Representative Webb," Kelrin said with a tone that made it clear he thought the human was overreacting. "But we are experienced colonists. We will be fine." Thomas just nodded. "The coordinates will be sent to your ships within an hour. Good luck, Ambassador. You are really going to need it." 3 weeks later, the Valkyrie fleet arrived at Earth's solar system. Nira, the lead scientist, stood looking out a window at the planet below. It was beautiful. Blue and green and white, with swirling clouds that looked peaceful and calm. "The air has 21% oxygen," said Marin, a technician working at a computer. "That is almost twice what we normally breathe." "We planned for that," Nira said. "Our buildings will filter the air to make it safe." "What about the landing spot?" The humans suggested a place called Montana. "It is flat, has fresh water, and the weather is moderate according to their records." Nira stared at Earth. Moderate weather. She had read what humans called moderate. It meant temperatures that changed by huge amounts every single day. It meant rain and snow and ice and heat, sometimes all in the same week. But what choice did they have? "Begin landing," she ordered. "Send 5,000 people first. We will build the base camp and make sure everything is safe before bringing everyone else down." The landing pods dropped away from the ships like seeds falling from a tree. They streaked through the atmosphere in trails of fire. Nira watched them fall toward the planet's surface. Peter, a human advisor who had volunteered to help them, stood nearby. He was watching the pods fall too and his face looked sad. "You seem worried," Nira said to him. Peter turned to look at her. In his eyes she saw something that made her feel cold inside. He felt sorry for them. Just remember what I told you in the training sessions, Peter said quietly. Earth does not care if you are ready. Earth does not negotiate or compromise. You either adapt quickly or you die. There is no middle ground. Your people survived, Nira said, trying to sound confident. So will we. Peter nodded slowly, but he did not look convinced. We survived because we come from Earth. We evolved there over millions of years. Our bodies were made by that planet. You are visitors. And Earth does not like visitors. The first pods touched down on the Montana plains. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant orange and red colors the Valkyrie had never seen before. It was beautiful and strange. Within 6 hours, the first Valkyrie would be dead. Within 1 day, they would understand what Class 13 really meant. Within a week, they would realize that humans were not being careful. Humans were being honest. And Earth was about to teach them lessons they would never forget. The moment the Valkyrie stepped out of their landing pods, they knew something was wrong. Their legs buckled. Their crystal bodies, which had always held them upright so easily, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Several older Valkyrie collapsed immediately, their structures cracking under pressure they had never experienced before. The gravity, gasped Kelrin, forcing himself to stand. Every movement felt like pushing through thick mud. It is 3 times stronger than home. Nira watched in horror as medics rushed to help the fallen. 2 elderly Valkyrie had already died. Their crystal bodies had simply shattered under Earth's pull. This was just the first hour. Get everyone into the habitat domes, she ordered. We need to reduce exposure until we can build support equipment. The Valkyrie stumbled and crawled toward the temporary shelters. The air was thick and heavy in their lungs. The oxygen was too rich. Several people started coughing and wheezing. One young Valkyrie named Kira fainted from oxygen intoxication. Then the rain started. At first it seemed gentle. Just water falling from the sky, something they had seen on other planets. But within minutes, the Valkyrie who were still outside started screaming. The rain was burning them. Not with heat, but with chemicals. Earth's rain was not pure water. It was filled with dissolved minerals and acids that were harmless to Earth life but ate away at Valkyrie crystal skin like poison. Get inside. Everyone inside now. Marin shouted, his arm already showing etch marks from the rain. They huddled in the domes, watching the rain pound against the transparent walls. The sound was deafening. Thunder rolled across the sky like the roar of some massive beast. Lightning split the darkness with blinding white light. The Valkyrie had never experienced a storm before. Their homeworld had stable weather controlled by their technology for thousands of years. This is normal? Whispered Kelrin, staring at the violence outside. The database says this is a light spring rain, Nira replied, her voice hollow with disbelief. As the sun set, the temperature dropped. On their homeworld, temperature stayed constant within 2 degrees all day and night. Here in just a few hours, it went from 25 degrees to 5 degrees. The Valkyrie's bodies, designed for stability, went into shock. 3 more died before they could adjust the habitat heaters. They thought the worst was over. They were wrong. The howling started just after midnight. It was a sound none of them had ever heard before. A long, eerie cry that echoed across the plains and made their crystal structures vibrate with primal fear. What is that? Kira asked, her voice barely a whisper. Through the dome walls they saw shapes moving in the darkness. Eyes reflected their lights, glowing yellow and hungry. The creatures moved in a pack, circling the settlement like they were studying it. Kelrin pulled up the Earth database on his computer. Dogs, he read aloud. Canis familiaris. Domesticated animals that humans kept as companions and helpers. Average weight 40 kilograms. Diet, omnivore. Temperament, friendly and loyal. Those do not look friendly, Marin said, watching the shadows prowl outside. The Valkyrie relaxed slightly. Just pets. Small animals that humans had controlled. Nothing to fear. They went to sleep, exhausted from the brutal first day. The attack came at dawn. The dogs had found a weak point in one of the smaller domes. The pack leader, a huge mixed breed with scarred fur and intelligent eyes, ripped through the material with powerful jaws. The others followed. To the Valkyrie, these creatures were monsters. 40 kilograms of pure muscle, with teeth designed for tearing meat and instincts honed over thousands of generations of hunting. The dogs had gone feral after humans left Earth, and they had reclaimed their place as predators. The screaming brought everyone running, but it was too late. The dogs moved with terrifying speed and coordination. They struck at the weakest Valkyrie, bringing them down like prey. Crystal bodies cracked under crushing jaws. The Valkyrie had no weapons, no way to fight back. They had never needed to fight anything before. 12 Valkyrie died in less than 5 minutes. The dogs left as quickly as they came, dragging 2 bodies with them. The survivors stood in stunned silence, staring at the blood and shattered crystals scattered across the ground. These were just dogs. Just small pets. And they had killed 12 people like it was nothing. Peter arrived on a shuttle that afternoon. He walked through the camp, his face grim as he looked at the damage. The Valkyrie were hiding in their sealed domes, too terrified to come out. Those were dogs, Nira said to him, her voice breaking. Your database said they were friendly. They said humans kept them as companions. Humans did, Peter confirmed. But these dogs have been wild for 200 years. They have gone back to being what dogs were before we domesticated them. Wolves. Pack hunters. And to them you look like prey. He gestured toward the mountains in the distance. Dogs are the least of your problems. Up there are bears. Some weigh 400 kilograms. There are mountain lions that can kill you with one bite. There are wolves even bigger and smarter than these dogs. There are snakes with venom that will kill you in minutes. There are spiders, insects, and even some plants that are deadly. Your world is hell, Kelrin said quietly. Peter shook his head. No. Our world is normal. Every other planet in the galaxy is soft and safe and easy. Earth is what a real planet looks like. This is what made humans what we are. We did not conquer Earth with technology. We survived it with stubbornness and refusal to die. He handed Nira a data storage device. These are complete human survival guides. Everything our ancestors learned over millions of years of evolution. How to build shelters. How to make weapons. How to fight. How to hunt. How to recognize danger. Start reading now. Start learning now. Or start digging graves. Peter looked around at the frightened Valkyrie hiding in their domes. You have lost 17,000 people in 1 week. That number will keep growing unless you stop thinking like civilized beings and start thinking like survivors. Earth does not care about your technology or your pride. Earth only respects one thing, the will to live. He turned to leave, then stopped. The humans who evolved here were prey for millions of years. Giant cats hunted us. Bears killed us. Even other humans were dangerous. We were weak and slow and had no natural weapons. But we survived because we learned to be mean, clever, and too stubborn to quit. You need to learn those lessons in months, not millennia. Good luck. As Peter's shuttle lifted off, Nira opened the survival guide on her computer. The first chapter title made her feel cold inside, Understanding Earth, Why Everything is Trying to Kill You. Outside the dome, crows had gathered around the bodies. Big black birds with intelligent eyes, studying the dead Valkyrie with curious interest. Even the birds on this planet seemed predatory. Nira looked at her people, huddled in fear, and made a decision. They would learn. They would adapt. Or they would all die. Earth had given them their first lesson. And the teaching had only just begun. 3 months had passed since the Valkyrie landed on Earth. The population had dropped from 50,000 to 31,000. Every single day brought new ways to die. Infections from bacteria that Earth life had evolved to resist. Plants that were poisonous to Valkyrie biology. Temperature swings that sent people into shock. Predators that saw them as easy meals. Nira barely slept anymore. She spent every waking hour in the research center, reading through human databases. What she found there changed everything she thought she knew about survival. Listen to this, she told the Colony Council, displaying images on the screen. Humans were not always the dominant species on Earth. For millions of years they were prey. They were hunted by giant cats with teeth as long as knives. By bears twice the size of the ones here now. By packs of hyenas that could crack bone with their jaws. Kelrin leaned forward in his exoskeleton. The mechanical suit was the only thing that let him walk in Earth's gravity without collapsing. How did they survive? They refused to give up, Nira said simply. They were weak, so they made weapons. Spears. Bows. Traps. They were slow, so they learned to hunt in groups and chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They were vulnerable, so they learned to control fire and use it to scare away predators. She pulled up more images. Humans domesticating wolves. Humans farming. Humans building walls and cities. They did not just survive Earth. They took control of it. They found other species and forced them to serve. They called it domestication. They turned wolves into dogs. Wild horses into transportation. Dangerous auroch cattle into farm animals. They reshaped the entire planet to suit their needs. A young scientist named Kira spoke up. We need to do the same. We cannot keep living in fear, hiding in our domes. We need to become like them. We need to become predators instead of prey. The council erupted in argument. Some thought the idea was madness. Others were desperate enough to try anything. After hours of debate, they agreed. They would learn from humanity's example. The changes started immediately. They studied human architecture and began building stronger shelters from stone and wood. Primitive compared to their technology, but effective against Earth's weather and wildlife. They created better exoskeleton suits that helped them move in the heavy gravity. They learned to use fire, something their species had never needed before. Most importantly, they learned to fight. Peter returned to teach them. He showed them how to make simple weapons. Spears with sharp metal points. Bows that could kill from a distance. Traps that could catch or kill animals. The Valkyrie, who had never hurt another living thing in their entire civilization, learned to hunt. Their first hunting trip was a disaster. They tracked a deer for hours, moving clumsily through the forest. When they finally got close enough, their bowstrings broke and the deer escaped. They came back exhausted and empty-handed. Again, Nira ordered. We try again tomorrow. It took 2 weeks before they successfully killed their first animal. A wild rabbit, small and fast, but they cornered it and brought it down. The hunting party stood over the body, shocked by what they had done. Then their stomachs reminded them how hungry they were, and they carried it back to camp. But even learning to survive was not enough. Kira proposed something that made half the colony furious. We need to change our bodies, she announced at a council meeting. Human DNA contains genes that make them resistant to Earth's diseases. Genes that make their bones stronger. Genes that let them survive in different temperatures. If we add some of these genes to our own, our children might have a real chance. That is an abomination, Kelrin shouted. We would no longer be pure Valkyrie. We would be hybrids. Monsters. We would be alive, Nira said quietly. Dead species do not get to worry about purity. They just get to be extinct. The vote was close, but survival won. They began genetic modification on the next generation. The first modified Valkyrie babies were born 2 months later. They were stronger than normal Valkyrie children. Their crystal structures were denser. They could tolerate Earth's gravity without support equipment. Peter visited during this time, bringing supplies and checking on their progress. He walked through the expanded settlement, noting the stone walls, the planted fields, the training areas where Valkyrie practiced with weapons. You are doing better than I expected, Peter admitted to Nira as they stood on the wall at sunset. Most species would have given up and asked for evacuation by now. We have nowhere to go, Nira said. Earth or extinction. Those are our only choices. Then you are learning the most important human lesson, Peter replied. When the universe gives you only terrible options, you pick the one that lets you survive one more day. That is how humans went from being prey to being the apex predator. One stubborn day at a time. In the fields below, Valkyrie farmers were harvesting their first successful crop. They had learned to grow earth plants, modifying them slightly to be less toxic to their biology. It was hard work in the heavy gravity, but they were doing it. A hunting party returned carrying a wild boar on poles between them. The animal was huge and dangerous, with sharp tusks that could gore a Valkyrie easily. But they had worked together, used tactics learned from human history, and brought it down. The colony cheered when they saw the hunters return victorious. Children played near the walls, the modified ones running and jumping in ways their parents never could. They laughed and shouted, not afraid of Earth the way the original colonists were. They had been born here. This was their home. That night, Nira stood outside the walls with a spear in her hand, keeping watch. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified to be out here in the dark. Now she scanned the shadows with calm alertness, listening for danger, ready to fight if needed. She heard something move in the bushes. Her grip tightened on the spear. A fox emerged, looked at her with wary eyes, then turned and ran. It had learned that the Valkyrie were not easy prey anymore. Nira smiled. It was a small victory, but it meant something. They were adapting. They were changing. They were learning what it meant to be a Deathworlder. Above her, Earth's moon rose huge and bright in the sky. On their homeworld, they had 2 small moons that barely gave any light. Here, the moon was so bright she could see clearly without artificial lights. Just another way Earth was excessive and extreme. But for the first time since landing, Nira looked at the moon and felt something other than fear. She felt hope. They were learning. They were surviving. They were becoming something new. Something that could live on humanity's nightmare world and not just survive but thrive. The transformation had begun. And there was no going back. 2 years had passed since the Valkyrie first landed on Earth. The settlement looked nothing like it had in the beginning. High stone walls surrounded clusters of buildings that mixed Valkyrie technology with human design. Guard towers stood at each corner with armed Valkyrie watching for threats. The fragile, frightened refugees who had arrived were gone. In their place stood harder, stronger beings who moved with confidence. The population had stabilized at 38,000. The losses had stopped. The modified children, now old enough to walk and talk, ran through the settlement without fear. They played in the rain that had once burned their parents. They climbed in the gravity that had crushed their grandparents. Earth was not their enemy. It was simply home. Nira led an exploration team into the mountains, searching for metal deposits they needed for construction. The team moved carefully but confidently through the rocky terrain. Each member carried weapons and wore light exoskeleton supports. They had learned to travel smart, always alert, always ready. That is when they found something impossible. Hidden in a valley, camouflaged to blend with the environment, was a human facility. Solar panels gleamed on the roofs. Communication dishes pointed at the sky. Lights glowed in windows. It was active. Occupied. The humans had been here the entire time. They watched us, whispered Kira, now head of colony security. Her hand moved to the weapon at her side. They watched us struggle and die and they did nothing. A door opened in the main building. A human woman walked out, flanked by two soldiers carrying weapons. She was tall with sun-weathered skin and calm gray eyes that missed nothing. Her uniform marked her as military. 2 years, 3 months and 14 days, the woman said without greeting. That is how long you have survived. Honestly, we bet you would evacuate after 6 months. You surprised us. Kelrin stepped forward, anger making his crystal body glow brighter. You watched us die. You sat here while children starved and people were torn apart by animals. Under direct orders from the Galactic Council, the woman replied evenly. My name is Commander Rachel Hayes. We were here as observers and emergency extraction only. The Council wanted to see if a non-Deathworld species could adapt to Class 13 conditions. If you had faced certain extinction, we would have evacuated you. But you adapted. You survived. People died, Nira said, her voice cold and hard in a way it never would have been 2 years ago. 19,000 people died. Rachel nodded slowly. Yes, and I am sorry for that. But colonization always costs lives. Human history is filled with failed colonies where everyone died from starvation, disease, or hostile conditions. You think Earth was easy for us just because we evolved here? We almost went extinct a dozen times. Ice ages, volcanoes, plagues, megafauna that hunted us. We lost millions of people learning to survive. You lost thousands and you are not even from here. That you are standing in front of me, armed and confident, means you passed the test. Test. Kira's hand tightened on her weapon. Rachel raised her hands peacefully. Please, come inside. Let me show you what we have been monitoring. Then you can decide if you want to shoot me or work with me. The Valkyrie delegation followed Rachel into the facility. Inside, human scientists worked at computers displaying extensive data about the Valkyrie colony. Charts tracked death rates, genetic changes, behavioral adaptations, and technology modifications. Everything had been documented. You are not the same species that landed 2 years ago, Rachel said, showing them genetic comparison charts. You are faster, stronger, more aggressive. Your fear responses have changed. Your children are even more different. In 3 or 4 generations, other Valkyrie would not recognize you. What do you want from us? Nira asked bluntly. Partnership, Rachel answered. You have proven something incredibly valuable. You have shown that non-native species can adapt to Deathworld conditions. That knowledge changes everything for the galaxy. In exchange for human technological support, protection, and assistance, we want access to your crystal technology and formal recognition of human territorial authority. You live on Earth now, which makes you our responsibility. The Valkyrie team talked among themselves in their chiming language. Finally, Kelrin spoke. We accept your offer. But understand this clearly. We are not your subjects or your pets. We are allies who earned the right to call this world home through blood and pain and adaptation. We will work with you as equals. Rachel smiled and extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Kelrin gripped it firmly, no longer intimidated by physical contact. Welcome to Earth officially, Rachel said. You are residents now, not refugees. Just remember that humans still govern this planet. We are willing to share it with beings tough enough to survive here. As they prepared to leave the facility, Nira stopped and looked back at Rachel. Why did you really watch us struggle? She asked. Tell me the truth. Rachel's smile faded. She walked to a window and pointed up at the stars. Because the galaxy is not safe, Rachel said quietly. There are aggressive species out there. Hostile empires. Things that make Earth look peaceful by comparison. Humanity needs allies who understand what it means to survive against impossible odds. We needed to know if you could become the kind of species we could trust in a real fight. She turned back to Nira. Soft species break under pressure. They panic. They give up. But you did not break. You bent and adapted and became stronger. Now we know we can count on you when things get bad. And things will get bad eventually. They always do. Nira understood. Earth had not been punishment. It had been training. There are more refugees in the galaxy, Nira said slowly. More desperate species with nowhere to go. Yes, Rachel confirmed. Send them to us, Nira said. We will teach them what you taught us. We will show them how to survive the impossible. We will forge them the way Earth forged us. Rachel nodded with respect in her eyes. That is exactly what we hoped you would say. As the Valkyrie team hiked back to their settlement, Kira walked beside Nira. We are not prey anymore, Kira said quietly. No, Nira agreed, looking at the mountains around them with new eyes. We are not. We are something Earth made. Something new and hard and unbreakable. Behind them, hidden in the mountains, Rachel watched them go and smiled. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson. Earth did not just create humans. Earth created survivors. And now there were two species who carried that lesson forward. The experiment had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. 5 years after landing on Earth, Nira stood in front of the Galactic Council. She was not physically present in the chamber, but appeared as a hologram transmitted across light years of space. Behind her, visible through the window of the transmission room, stretched the city of New Haven. It was a thriving settlement of 45,000 Valkyrie and humans living together. The council chamber fell silent as she began to speak. When we came to Earth we were refugees, Nira said, her voice steady and strong. We were desperate, naive and completely unprepared. We thought the Class 13 designation was human exaggeration. We believed our technology and experience would be enough. We were wrong about everything. She pulled up data displays showing graphs and numbers that told the story of their struggle. Death rates, adaptation curves, genetic modifications. The council members leaned forward, studying the information with growing interest. In the first month alone, we lost 19,000 people, Nira continued. Gravity crushed them. Weather killed them. Predators hunted them. Diseases infected them. Starvation took them. Earth destroyed us in ways we never imagined possible. We learned that humans did not conquer their world with superior technology. They conquered it through millions of years of stubborn refusal to die. Council member Varric pulsed orange with concern. Then why did you stay? You could have requested evacuation at any time. Because we had nowhere else to go, Nira replied simply. And because staying taught us something precious. Earth does not offer mercy or sanctuary. Earth offers transformation. We are not the same beings who landed 5 years ago. Look at us now. The display changed to show modern Valkyrie. They stood straight and tall, moving without exoskeletons. They wore practical clothing designed for work and survival, not the decorative robes they once preferred. In the background, Valkyrie children played roughly with human children, laughing and wrestling without fear. We are stronger now. Faster. More resilient. Our children are born already adapted to Earth's harsh conditions. We hunt. We build. We fight when necessary. We learned what it truly means to be a Deathworlder. Not through millions of years of evolution, but through 5 years of determination and pain. Thomas Webb, now a senior council member with gray in his hair, spoke up. What message are you trying to deliver, colony leader Nira? A warning, Nira said, and her voice carried an edge that made several council members shift uncomfortably. The galaxy has grown soft. Species live on gentle worlds with perfect climates and no natural predators. They have forgotten what survival really means. But Earth remembers. Humans remember. And now we remember too. She leaned forward, and the light caught her crystalline form in sharp angles that looked almost predatory. Any species can face extinction. Any comfortable world can become hostile. When that day comes, you will need allies who know how to survive impossible situations. Humans learned this lesson over millions of years and nearly went extinct several times in the process. We learned it in 5 brutal years. The next species you send to a death world will learn it from both of us. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Voices overlapped in dozens of languages. Nira waited for them to quiet down, then continued. We are establishing the Deathworld Adaptation Institute here on Earth. Any species facing extinction, any refugees with nowhere else to go, send them to us. We will teach them what humans taught us. We will forge them in the same fire that created humanity and remade the Valkyrie. They will adapt or die, but they will have a real chance to survive. Kelrin appeared beside her hologram, also addressing the council. His crystal body had changed over 5 years, becoming darker and denser. He looked nothing like the ambassador who had first asked for help. Earth is our home now, Kelrin said firmly. Its dangers taught us. Its cruelty made us strong. We will never be prey again. And we will make sure no desperate species faces the same challenges without guidance and support. Thomas Webb stood, drawing every eye in the chamber to him. The human government fully supports this proposal. Earth will remain protected as a nature preserve, but we will designate specific adaptation zones for refugee species. Under human oversight and with Valkyrie guidance, we will create a path to survival that does not require millions of years of evolution. The vote took less than an hour. It passed with overwhelming support. Species across the galaxy were already facing climate disasters, dying stars and resource depletion. The offer of a second chance, no matter how difficult, was too valuable to refuse. Rachel Hayes stood with Nira outside New Haven's walls after the transmission ended. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Young Valkyrie and human children played in the compound yard, their laughter mixing with the distant calls of birds and animals. Your people have changed so much, Rachel observed. Sometimes I forget you were not born here. We paid a terrible price for that change, Nira said quietly. 19,000 lives lost. Countless injuries. Genetic modifications that mean we can never go back to what we were. But we survived. That is worth something. That is worth everything, Rachel corrected. Earth takes what you are and gives back something harder. Something the universe cannot break. Humans went from prey to predator over millions of years. You did it in 5. That is remarkable. A Valkyrie child ran past, chasing a human girl, both shrieking with joy and excitement. The child's parents barely looked up. 5 years ago they would have been horrified by such rough play. Now it was normal. Are we still Valkyrie? Nira asked softly, voicing a question that haunted her. Rachel thought carefully before answering. You are something new. Something that could only exist here. Earth does not just change you. It completely remakes you into something suited for survival. Humans went from frightened prey to apex predators. The Valkyrie went from fragile crystal beings to hardy survivors. Whatever species comes next will have their own transformation. And what about the galaxy? Nira asked. The galaxy, Rachel said with a slight smile, is about to learn why humans never stop talking about Earth. Because now you will spread that same lesson. One transformed species at a time. In orbit above Earth, more refugee ships were already requesting permission to land. Word had spread across the galaxy about the Valkyrie's success. There was a place where extinction could be defeated, where desperation could become strength, where the weak could become powerful. But that place demanded everything. It demanded blood, pain, tears, and the willingness to become something entirely different from what you were. That place was Earth. And for those desperate enough to pay the price, it offered something no other world in the galaxy could provide: transformation through survival. Nira looked at her reflection in the compound window. Her crystalline structure had changed completely over 5 years. It was denser, darker, and stronger. She barely recognized herself compared to the frightened scientist who had first arrived. But she was alive. Her people were thriving. And they would make sure others had the same chance they did. Earth had been their teacher, their torturer, and ultimately their salvation. It had taken everything they were and forged them into something new. Something unbreakable. The lesson was complete. Now it was time to teach others. Nira smiled as she watched the sun set over her adopted homeworld. Earth was beautiful and terrible and perfect. And it was home.